Hey folks, Damon Vrabel at the Council on Renewal. I want to follow up Renaissance 2.0 with a second video series focused on money. Some specific issues we need to clear up because it seems like nobody understands the issue of money and what the problems are that's causing the United States to enter one of the more dangerous phases of its life. The profession of economics completely hides the issue or confuses it or muddies the water, whether it's neoclassical, neoliberalism, or Austrian theory, or monetarism, or chartalism, it doesn't matter. None of them will talk about the key issues that I'm going to address in this series. The first two things I need to cover in this video before we get into more detail about the monetary system is the issue of debt and debt-based money. Because I've used that term in articles and videos and people don't know what I'm talking about. We need to get real specific about it. And second, the issue of privately held balance sheets. Now, to explain both of those, I need to explain what a balance sheet is overall. And many of you know this already. They teach it at business schools and accounting schools, but even those schools don't teach the issue that I'll talk about in this series, mainly Machiavellian power. So a balance sheet is a T diagram with assets on the left and liabilities or debt on the right. And this is used to paint the picture of someone's financial condition at any given time. A person or a government or a business, to show how many assets they have versus debt. So let's say you live in a $100,000 house, or you rent a $100,000 house, a rental property, and you had to get an $80,000 loan from a bank for that house. So that's 100K asset and 80K debt. Now, the important difference here is that an asset is what makes money for the person or the government or the business, reflected in the balance sheet. And the liability loses money. It costs you money over time, plus you owe it back to someone else. It's not something that you will keep. And in a world governed by money, where money rules the world, it's what determines power. If you have something that makes money, that increases your power, or the person, or the government, or the business's power. And liability, since you lose money, it decreases a person's power. That's the key Machiavellian dynamic that no one will talk about in schools. And of course, why would they? The people with power don't want other people being taught the rules of the world. But remember this diagram. You're going to see it in a lot of the other videos. The T diagram and what makes money and loses money and makes and loses power. It may seem boring, or you may wonder why we're talking about balance sheets, but it really is it gets to the most important source of power in the whole world. I'm going to draw another balance sheet up here. Again, assets on the left and liabilities on the right. And this one is going to be the people's balance sheet, the population of the United States. And this will be the banking system's balance sheet. You need to see this picture in order to understand our monetary system. Just reading Austrian theory about the need for intrinsic value, or reading the gold bugs about the need for gold backing, it's not true. And reading the monetarists about the quantity theory of money. It all misses this issue here, where all money in our system comes into the economy as an asset to the bank. What an amazing power, isn't it? To be able to create electronic digits, put them on your balance sheet, something that makes money and gains power for you. Because they aren't really loaning anything. They're just adding electronic digits to someone's bank account. And it's people that sign up for debt. So all money comes into the system as a debt to the people. It's on the liability side of their balance sheet. All money comes into the system that way. And so what do you know already, just based on this diagram? Well, you know that the monetary system, by its very design, is designed to make money and gain power for the banks, and over time lose money and reduce power of the people, or the government, or other businesses that aren't aligned with the banking system. Whatever is on this balance sheet over here, it doesn't matter what it is. Everything else besides banks can only get debt. As far as source money coming into the system, it all comes into the system as debt. Now, isn't that a bit ridiculous to have a monetary system that only serves a few people in a nice clique over here and is designed to diminish the power of everyone else? And that's the first major point I wanted to make. Now, this means a lot of things that we'll get into in other videos, and I addressed it in Renaissance 2.0 to some degree. But one of the things this means is that Austrian theory, the Austrians who say we just need to save more and that'll fix our economy, well, it's impossible to have net savings in a system where all money comes from debt. That's an illusion now. It's been an illusion for 30 or 40 years. It was true back when Austrian theory was written, back when the people had money that was an asset to them, and they could store in the bank for a fee, and then the banks could use it for investment. That real savings could exist back then. It cannot exist now. On a net collective basis, it can't exist because everyone's in debt. They can make an illusion of it by hiding it on the government balance sheet, and that's what we did for a long time. But there is no net savings. That's not the solution. The other thing to mention is that this is usury. It's monolithic usury. It's a pyramid system where a few people kind of live off the backs of everyone else. And that seemed like a good thing in the first phase, in the first few phases. But now we're getting to the point of saturation. And we're getting to the point where people are realizing their debt slavery condition. And so that's a problem, having a monetary system built 100% on usury. Now, this also sets up a major divide in the world between, on the one hand, capital holders. These are the richest people in the world, the richest pools of capital in the world. And on the other, generally, we'll just say the people. So you have private capital holders versus the people. And the capital holders control the private banking system. And this is the ultimate source of power in the world, because it's even more powerful than just owning assets on your balance sheet. Whereas the capital holders sit above even balance sheets, and they use their power to control balance sheets. Not only do they control the banking system, but through the banking system, they control everybody else's balance sheet, all the other people, governments, and non-bank businesses. So these are the ultimate Machiavellian controllers in our system. So that's the second point, that this is private capital. It's a privately held monetary system. The monetary system itself is privately held. Don't believe the lie that government prints money. It hasn't happened in ages. It's not true. We get liquidity, we get money from going into debt, ultimately to the private capital holders. And they're not the only ones over here on this side of the world. You also have like the top MBAs, the people that come out of the top business schools and go to work for the elite banking system. The top JDs, the top lawyers, they go to the law firms that work with the banking system. Oh, and the top economists. Economists basically work for the banking system. And it's no surprise then that they don't talk about this fundamental issue. Nobody wants you to know about that. And I don't even know if it's deliberate when it comes to the economists. The issue with economists is they don't live in the real world of balance sheet and Machiavellian competition for assets on the balance sheet. They deal with theory. In fact, I don't think I ever heard the issue of a balance sheet discussed in any of my economics courses. And I had a lot of economic training. So not only do you have these really driven, really smart people serving the private capital holders, so it's a really powerful system, they've also learned how to get things like courts over here. The top corporate officers in the system. Advertising. Top politicians, people like the president, the treasury secretary, the secretary of state, secretary of defense. They're all kind of over here aligned with the capital holders and the banking system. Basically, whoever wants to be in the world of money and power, they're over here. And everyone else is stuck in the world of diminishing money and diminishing power. The purpose of private elite schooling is to gain access to this little clique. So That's the basis of our monetary system. It's the basic divide that it sets up between the money pushers over here and the people that serve the pushers versus the money users that have to be in a scarcity condition, borrowing and paying back more than they borrow back to this side. Now, because it's privately held, this also means that we're living in exponential growth. Economists will study this issue and wonder why the debt grows exponentially, why the United States government debt is where it is today. Because they have complex mathematical models that say that debt should be able to be steady state. Well, again, that's because economists live in the theoretical world. They aren't looking at the issue of who owns the balance sheet, who controls the monetary system. It sits on privately held balance sheets controlled by private capital holders, which means return on capital dictates the monetary system's growth. The capital holders demand a 2 or 3 or 5% return every year. That's exponential growth. So it's no accident that the United States government's debt keeps increasing exponentially. The politicians will love to put on a stage show arguing back and forth. Oh, Republicans, it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault. Every 4 years they make the same argument and they don't bother to notice that it never changes. The exponential growth curve continues. You would think that they'd be like, maybe it's not our fault. But they don't bother to notice that it doesn't matter who is in power over here. The system must grow exponentially because of this private nature. The banks grow it by growing this money sitting on their balance sheet, which mathematically by definition means that the people's debt and the government's debt over here has to grow exponentially. Again, it's just the fundamental design of our monetary system. I'm not talking politics or ideology here. I'm talking about mathematical fact. And so those are the two key issues I wanted to get across in this first video. And hopefully you start seeing the power dynamics in the monetary system and how this is the ultimate source of power in the world. Just think about the size of the US monetary system, the amount of power sitting here in the banking system and the private capital holders that control it. Machiavelli never dreamed of such power.